Obviously, a mystery novelist who disappears is a real enigma that captivates everyone.
And suddenly, the printing of the newspaper increased, and we could read on the front pages. Was Agatha Christie kidnapped? Was Agatha Christie killed by her husband?
And they make 1,000 suppositions. It's a case that quickly takes on national significance.
On December 4th, 1926, near London, by a pond in the coolness of the morning, two walkers make a disturbing discovery. An abandoned car. The headlights are still on. Inside, 3 clues: a fur coat, a powder compact, and a driver's license. These items belong to Agatha Christie. This isolated place is more than 25 kilometers from her home. It is called Silent Pool, and it is, apparently, haunted.
This was one of the places where she was told to be. Because the place is quite pretty now, but in December, when she disappeared, it's sinister and extreme. If you come here in December, at night, which I did, it's scaring. It's not somewhere women go for fun.
This disappearance is taken very seriously. Who could possibly have it in for the novelist? Scotland Yard, the British police, first questions her husband, Archibald Christie.
Why him? Because Archibald Christie spent the night just a few miles from Silent Pool, which is completely crazy anyway.
Archie is quite frank. He explains to them that the couple is not doing well, that he himself has a mistress, and that his wife has learned about this extramarital affair.
Then they asked him, "What did you do with the body?"
Archibald Christie, an unfaithful husband who might have decided to get rid of a troublesome wife. Scotland Yard considers this scenario quite plausible, but very quickly, testimonies contradict the murder theory.
She was seen by 2 or 3 people during the night. She was parked near here. She might have come here. She might have even thought, this is where I drown myself. And the belief by the policeman in charge of the case was that she killed herself. And there was a massive hunt, and everyone looked for her. They dredged the whole thing, and there's another pond behind this tree. They also dredged there. And they firmly believed that they would find Agatha Christie's body in it.
But no body was found in the ponds, so the search intensified, even into the forest surrounding Silent Pool. Every grove, every nook was meticulously combed through. Hundreds of people volunteer, among them an expert in criminal investigation who wrote dozens of criminal stories. He is the creator of Sherlock Holmes, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. He comes to help, with a crazy idea in mind, to convince Scotland Yard to go beyond the classic investigation methods which, for now, are yielding nothing.
Sir Arthur Conan Doyle is at this time very inclined towards mysticism. He belongs to a society that conducts seances and summons spirits. And so he proposes to the family to find out where Agatha is, if the family entrusts him with personal items.
Sir Arthur Conan Doyle then goes to the suburbs of London, to a medium, with a glove given by the novelist's husband, and a question: is she still alive? The seance begins. The pendulum swings, and the medium claims to have contacted the spirit of Agatha Christie.
The medium tells him, which is of course a way of answering without answering, that she is alive, without saying where she is.
At this stage, no one can say where Agatha Christie is. Was she killed? Did she take her own life? And what if it was a setup? This idea starts to run through the investigators' minds, who have just made a discovery, a message that Agatha sent on the evening of her disappearance.
She sent a letter to her brother-in-law, so Archie's brother, and the police chose not to believe this letter, but it actually said what she had done. She said, "I'm going up north to get away." And it also meant, "Tell Archie to come find me." This whole thing was about getting him back.
An escape, like a cry for help, because this year, 1926, has not been rosy for the young novelist. She has just published her 6th novel, The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, her first major success in bookstores. But this professional rise hides a deep personal despair. Agatha is actually living through the darkest moments of her life.
It's a somewhat difficult period for her. She has just lost her mother, to whom she was very attached. Her husband neglects her, leaving her alone with their daughter Rosalind, who is 7 years old. She feels like she's holding the household together by herself. So, it's a very busy time for her professionally. But her family life, and especially her love life, are struggling.
So, it is alone that Agatha must mourn her beloved mother, as Archibald Christie has almost left the marital home. For several months, he has indeed been spending most of his time with a secretary from the insurance office where he works, Nancy Neal. And in the autumn of 1926, a dramatic turn of events, he decides to confess everything to his wife.
Her husband joins her at Ashfield, and then he tells her, "I have met someone. I want you to grant me a divorce as soon as possible." And obviously, it's a terrible blow for her. She did not expect it at all.
Her parents' marriage is an example for her. She says at one point, "I don't know how my parents managed to stay married that long. I would love to have such a marriage." When she knows she is being cheated on, she is not warned. She is like the naive little girl with a marshmallow heart who doesn't understand at all how her husband leaves her for a younger woman, 10 years younger, the classic scenario. And the day he tells her, "I want a divorce," he still has the nerve to say, "But please, it shouldn't be too widely known. I want to protect Nancy Neal."
Agatha Christie is rather reserved. She is not a woman who readily shows her feelings. She is quite secretive. But here, she has what one might call a fit of anger. And so, she decides to leave the house.
We can hear the gravel crunching under the tires as she leaves. She completely loses it, so to speak. She really doesn't feel good about herself. And she's suffering. She's truly a wounded woman.
What is Agatha Christie thinking when she runs away from home on December 3rd, 1926? Does she have a plan? Does she even know where all this will lead her? Despite the few clues she has left, no one can answer her questions. And now the whole of England is swept up in an incredible game of trails. Three days after the disappearance of Agatha Christie, the police are still struggling to trace her path. She passed through London and the luxury store Harrods, an institution in England since 1834. She left a ring there to be repaired, but Scotland Yard, like the press, has to satisfied with this scant clue. In reality, on the morning of December 5th, 1926, Agatha Christie takes a train heading to Yorkshire, in the north of England. She goes to Harrogate, a spa town founded in the 17th century. This jewel of Victorian architecture owes its fame to its water, the most mineral-rich in the country. The city has grand hotels, spas, and vast parks, like Valley Gardens, the largest in the city, which houses the Pavilion, a performance hall built in the early 1920s.
In the 20s, this place would have been more about promenading, and there were a lot of people from upper class and royalty, politicians too. and there was room to say that they could hold a cabinet meeting in Harrogate because so many politicians came up in Harrogate during the summer months.
Harrogate, a chic, peaceful place where Agatha hopes to go unnoticed.
Sometimes the best place to hide is in plain sight. Harrogate was known for its discretion. People recognized her, but nobody wanted to embarrass her. That was the social standard at that time, and there was no such things as paparazzi. So people wanted to keep their jobs by saying nothing. If she disappeared today, it would be on the internet before she even got here.
Agatha Christie booked a room at the Anhydropathic Treatments, one of the most luxurious hotels in the city, and she intends to stay there incognito.
Oh, incredible revenge. Agatha Christie, registered under the name of her husband's mistress, Miss Neal. Miss Teresa Neal, only the first name changed.
A supposedly South African Teresa Neal arrived from Cape Town, intending to enjoy her stay in Harrogate.
One indeed imagines an unhappy Agatha who would be moping, but in reality, she dances. She goes to parties, she dines at restaurants, and so she has a perfectly normal spa-goer's life.
It's a little bit like she wakes up being all alone there. It must do her good. It must have helped her to get out a little from her gloom or depression.
In Harrogate, Agatha Christie visits the royal baths. In the afternoon, she walks for long hours without being recognized. And once back at the hotel, in her room on the second floor, she reads the press where her disappearance continues to hit the headlines. This situation amused her for a while, but she is horrified to discover that now all the details of her private life are spread across the front page.
She feels like a hunted fox. It's the first time she's been so much at the center of the news, depicted in a way that isn't very pleasant. The cheated woman who disappears.
Agatha Christie, who hated the press, hated being seen, who was terribly shy and anxious whenever there were too many people around her, finds herself almost, overwhelmed by the press that sees the matter.
This affair put her in the spotlight. She was already known as a novelist, but now all of England knows Agatha Christie.
Besides her name, it is especially her face that becomes familiar to the English. So much so that 9 days after her disappearance, a man makes the connection with the newspaper photographs and recognizes Agatha Christie.
It's a special testimony that alerts the investigators. It's the testimony of a saxophonist or the drummer of a jazz band that performs in Yorkshire, in the hotels of Yorkshire.
And the man murmured to his friend, "I swear to you, it's Agatha Christie." The other, of course, said, "You're talking nonsense." But still, the doubt remains.
The police nevertheless consider the testimony credible. Archibald is informed and immediately heads to Harrogate in the hope of finding the woman who might be his wife.
He arrives the next morning. He is furious, and he approaches her from the front and says to her, "Agatha Christie, this has to stop. You are my wife. That's enough." And Agatha Christie looks him straight in the eyes and says, "Excuse me, sir, but I do not know you." You have to imagine Archibald Christie's face. It's just mind-blowing. I mean, he knows it's his wife, but she has such a look and such a stance, such an attitude that she really swears she doesn't know him, and everyone in the hotel doubts.
But the craziest part of this affair is that these missed reunions do not prevent the Christie couple from calmly heading back to Sunningdale to return to their marital home. They even resume their life together, and Agatha remains silent. She offers no explanation to her loved ones about what happened. The only theory considered is amnesia.
Her husband even went so far as to persuade her to see specialists, as they said at the time, to get treatment in London. But the craziest part is that she went to see the specialists. She played along to the end. That is to say, we have the two possible endings to the detective novel here. On one hand, she became the woman who bears the name of Archibald Christie's mistress, and on the other, the second ending, she goes to see specialists. She was amnesiac. But was she really? When we read her novels afterward, or her memories, or her autobiography, we don't get the impression that her memory really falters.
I think today that she completely staged her disappearance. Her life was slipping away from her. Did she want to reclaim her life by inventing this story? It's quite possible. We'll never know the truth about this whole story.
In 1926, Agatha Christie revealed her dark side, heroine of a mystery for which we still do not have the key. Staging her own life, inventing stories, cultivating mystery, is an art in which she has excelled since her earliest childhood.
All her memories are in Ashfield, so it's a little treasure for her. It's something that is part of her intimacy and likely inspires many of the settings in her books.
Ashfield, it's the house of happiness. It's a big house with a large garden.
There are a lot of trinkets inside, family memories, and Ashfield remains for her the dream house because it is the house of her childhood.
It is in this family setting that Agatha Miller is born on September 15, 1890. She is the youngest in the family. Her brother, Louis Montand, is already 10 years old, and her sister, Margaret, 11 years old. Agatha grows up in the seaside town of Torquay. Her mother, Clara, is English. Her father, Frederick Miller, is American.
He lives off his income, his family sends him money from the United States, and he leads the life of an Englishman. He goes to the club in the afternoon, entertains friends in the evening, but he doesn't work much. He married a distant cousin, Clara. Clara is a somewhat more complex woman, quite melancholic, very strict about her children's education.
She still manages with a masterful hand a household with about 10 servants. These are people who lead an extremely active life.
Clara Miller takes charge of her daughter's education herself. Louis and Margaret are in boarding school, but Agatha is not enrolled. Her parents encourage her to develop her own perspective, that of a different little girl, sometimes shy and solitary, sometimes curious and dreamy.
She likes to play alone. She likes to tell herself stories, little children's stories. She is daydreaming.
She has a very rich inner world. She imagines characters she calls kitten. So they are little animals. She makes them live 1,000 stories.
She would say to them, "Come have tea, kitten. Come eat." And so she talks to the kitten, and she has this very beautiful phrase. She says somewhere, "It is always to the kitten that I speak."
It's a little bit like Lewis Carroll. She is in an imaginary world of animals that live and talk. She is extremely moving, a little girl wandering in her own world.
Agatha Christie is very fond of food. She loves the dishes prepared by Mrs. Potter, the cook, especially all the fruit pies. The clotted cream, which is a very, very rich, very caloric cream, but which she is crazy about. She says there is none better.
We see her, a little blonde girl, rather a model little girl. In reality, she was already a very adventurous little girl who played in the park.
Agatha Christie could be cheeky. She could answer back, throw in a little slang word, but which at the time was something terrible. For example, she sometimes shouted at her parents, "You're annoying me," and would climb a tree without answering her parents anymore. Is that a flaw, or is it simply the lively side of a little girl?
Little Agatha has a strong personality. Very quickly, she asserts herself and even shows signs of precocity. At 3 years old, She already knows how to read and learned by herself.
She had free access to the library, and so, in a way, her critical mind was already being shaped, along with her education, as she quickly delved into astronomy treatises. She is curious about culture, so she reads everything, not necessarily with discernment.
And it is these readings that she shares with her mother, who wants her to have somewhat edifying readings. So, she makes her read the great events of history, which deeply bores Agatha, but Agatha, being a good daughter, reads them. And also books by Walter Scott, for example, which they read together.
Agatha's mother also introduces her to detective literature. She discovers the famous Arsène Lupin, created by the Frenchman Maurice Leblanc, or Sherlock Holmes, whose investigations fascinate her.
She reads all of Arthur Conan Doyle, who is one of the most famous authors of the time, an author read even by Queen Victoria. So detective novels are quite a common reading for her.
Agatha already delights in the most complex plots, like the one her older sister Madge recommends to her, The Mystery of the Yellow Room by Gaston Leroux, a foundational read.
The little girl's curiosity is insatiable, her thirst for adventure as well. So it is with joy that she welcomes, at the age of 6, the announcement her parents make. They are renting out the Ashfield house to spend the summer in a country where life is cheaper, France.
In 1896, Agatha discovers the fresh air of the Pyrenees and the city of Pau, then undergoing transformation. The Millers set down their suitcases at the Grand Hotel Beau Séjour.
When she stays in this hotel in Pau, she is still in a closed circuit, let's say, compared to the French population, as she mingles with other English families, American families. It's really a little England, or a little America, that is recreated in this French city.
Pau owes its transformation to the English. Along the recently opened boulevard, wealthy families are building large villas. And recently, the city also has its own casino. In this city, which Lamartine said is the most beautiful view on earth, people come to see and be seen, especially on the golf green, the oldest on the continent. It dates back to 1856. Agatha Miller's father goes there every early afternoon because he is passionate about this sport. And after each round, he goes to relax in a local institution.
Here is the English club that was created in the mid-19th century. It is the control tower of the sporting and social life of Pau. Agatha Christie's father was American. He was invited here, to the Circle, and a chronicler of the time recounts that they drank heavily and gambled big. It is not really the ideal place for children. Several spots in the city have been reserved for them, notably Beaumont Park, which is a park right next to the castle. A walled area where there were puppet shows, pony rides, and bowling games, and the nannies could easily watch over them there.
To spend these afternoons in the park near the castle, Agatha is entrusted to the care of a French nanny, a young 26-year-old Béarnaise, Marie Siget.
She is very attached to Marie. She teaches her French, but she teaches her French with a hint of a southwestern accent that Agatha will keep all her life. And it is notably she who will introduce her to La Comtesse de Ségur and Les Mémoires d'un Âne, the first book she will be able to read entirely in French.
Everything interests her. French cuisine interests her. French architecture interests her. The way people are dressed interests her. The way the language is written, that is to say, the other letters, the other syllables, interest her. It's a very important period in Agatha Christie's life, who kept a deep affection for the French and for her French readers. When her books were translated into French, she was really very, very happy.
When the Miller family returns to the shores of the English Riviera and the town of Torquay, Agatha is 7 years old. Her father is increasingly often away visiting his family in the United States. Alone with her mother, the little girl perfects her education.
Her mother instills values in her at the time, which are still very important in post-Victorian England. And that is a certain restraint, a certain composure. She is a proper English young lady and must remain so. But at the same time, there is always this little touch of eccentricity.
Clara Miller is whimsical, to the point of inviting her youngest to join her in her seances.
It should be remembered that at that time, it was quite common. A few years earlier, Victor Hugo was conducting seances. Conan Doyle, too. There is always spiritualism, and it's something that is very important.
Agatha discovers the world of esotericism. She is fascinated, but also disturbed. Even in her childhood nights, the nightmares are numerous. The one that keeps coming back is the gunman, the man with the revolver, the man who, every night, kills a different victim.
Every time her father returns to Ashfield, it is a relief for Agatha. He is the one she likes to confide in. It is to him that she expresses her fears. Frederick Miller listens to her, reassures her. He devotes all his time to his beloved daughter.
Her father calls her his little black hen. He is very attached to her. He sings nursery rhymes to her, writes her texts, and writes her letters when he goes to the United States.
Agatha Christie sees her father as a hero. And then she is a little bit, how to say, not jealous or envious, but she would like her father to be proud of her, as he is of her sister Madge, who writes stories that, quite young, around the age of 17, are already published in Vanity Fair. Her father's pride is what she would like to gain. She admires him. He is a hero.
Alas, Frederick Miller has a fragile heart. He suddenly passes away in 1901. Agatha is only 11 years old. After the death of this much-loved father, she decides to use the notebook he had given her. She pours her sorrow and her first stories into it.
Writing, quite early on, seems natural to her, as she doesn't like to express herself orally. However, she's very comfortable with writing.
She writes for the first time at 11 years old, at the age of 11. She writes a poem about the arrival of the tramway in Torquay, which annoys the town's residents because it causes a lot of construction and confusion in the city.
She writes her little quatrain poem in which she says roughly that the tram left in the morning. It was a pretty color. But the problem came because the train disappeared in the evening, of course, since it was put in the garage. She sends that to the newspaper, quite bold for the little girl. And so the little poem is published in the local newspaper, which makes everyone at home proud.
In her adolescence, Agatha is encouraged to write by her mother, particularly sentimental stories in the vein of Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, and all those novels for young girls that were very popular at the time. But Agatha does not identify with these corseted heroines. She wishes to write another story, her own.
Not once, even though she says that obviously, like all young girls, she dreams of Prince Charming, the ideal husband, but not once does she think that will be her only destiny. And so, whether it's the destiny of an adventurer, or a stenographer, or a mathematician, or a singer, she plans to have a personal career in any case. And that is extremely modern.
Agatha wants to be a singer. She doesn't want to be a writer at first. She wants to be an opera singer. She imagines herself in Wagnerian heroines. She sees herself on stage, really, but as great heroines.
Clara Miller does everything to make her daughter better in this field.
Clara Miller agrees that Agatha leaves her native Devon County to settle on the other side of the Channel, in Paris, a city inhabited by the arts. In the 16th arrondissement, known for its pure air, Agatha stays on Avenue Iéna. It's the Belle Époque. Paris reinvents itself. Paris lights up. and a new world opens up to the young Englishwoman, the world of culture.
She goes to the theater to see the new shows. She attends performances by Sarah Bernhardt, who is the big star of the time. She notes in her autobiography that it's something that left a strong impression on her. And as she always dreams of being on stage, all of this also nourishes her and makes her even more eager to continue,
For 6 months, the young girl frequents the Garnier Opera. She is fascinated. Every day, she takes lessons with a singing and piano teacher.
She talks about all the efforts needed for her to articulate well with a teacher who tells her she has an English accent, that she is not very expressive, and so makes her do exercises with pencils in her mouth, making her articulate the words extremely.
But she quickly understands that she is not at the level of the Wagnerian heroines she would like to perform.
Her teacher in Paris tells her that likely she does not have the vocal ability to become a true opera singer.
And that is not Agatha's only handicap.
One day, she is invited to perform in front of the small circle of parents and friends from the boarding school. And then, disaster. She gets stage fright and can't do anything. And Agatha, who is quite perceptive about herself, realizes that indeed she is shy, reserved, and that performing on stage will not suit her. Her mother does everything to find her a good husband, because that is still a mother's main concern at that time.
A husband who is a serious man, preferably with wealth, rather bourgeois or aristocratic. They do not look outside their circle, that's for sure.
To ensure her daughter meets the best possible matches, Clara Miller organizes a grand trip to Cairo, as it is in Egypt that the English high society spends the winter. In 1906, Agatha is introduced to society, as they said at the time.
She discovers the pleasure of excursions to the pyramids. She's actually much more interested in picnics than in the wonders of Egypt, much to her mother's dismay. So she's having fun. In fact, Agatha, for the first time in her life, is really having fun in Cairo. All she cares about is partying.
At that moment, she has a few suitors. So she admits in her autobiography that she had a lot of fun leading them on, since, of course, it allowed her on one hand to forget her shyness, because she was rather shy, and on the other hand, to make fun a little of her suitors, who were so stereotypical and who always said the same phrases for ultimately the same result, because they too were presented to society and were not much more resourceful than the young girls. On the contrary.
So she meets boys. She starts having tiny little flirts, which don't even involve kissing, really just holding fingertips and feeling like you've done something absolutely crazy. You jump all over. You definitely don't tell your mother. You just say, I met this boy. He seems very serious. That's the phrase, he seems very serious.
Serious or not, no man finds favor in Agatha's eyes during the 3 months spent in Cairo. It is thus as a single woman that the young lady returns to the Devon coast.
When she returns from Egypt, still in the swing of balls and parties and cocktails, she is now a young woman of the world and is invited by family friends to gatherings. So, she continues her social life.
Here is one of the places that young people from high society frequent at the time in England. A building steeped in history, Duckbrook Manor, renowned since the early 19th century for its incredible receptions.
Good evening. Welcome to Brooke House.
Decorated in the purest Victorian style, this sublime residence has one of the largest private collections of portraits in England. a manor with about 100 rooms, owned at the time by Lord and Lady Clifford. She is known in the region for her matchmaking skills. It is indeed at her invitation that on the evening of October 12th, 1912, Agatha attends a ball. The goal remains the same, to meet a young man while respecting the customs.
Here is the dining room of Brooke Manor. In Agatha's time, it was the grand ballroom. Today, when a guy catches your eye at a party, you exchange numbers so that you can go on a date. It certainly wasn't like that at that time. You can't just harsh things. You needed to sit and wait. Wait until someone approaches you and asks you to dance.
Faithful to propriety, Agatha patiently waits for a potential suitor. It is then that a young man approaches her. His name is Archibald Christie, and in a few seconds he makes her heart flutter.
He really had a handsome face, you know. He had everything to appeal to a young girl. He was romantic and was trying to look different from the boys she had already met.
In fact, she is attracted to her opposite because he is quite comfortable in public. He is very self-assured. She, on the other hand, always has this reserve, which she had all her life. And so, it's a bit like two opposites coming together. So, they dance for the first time. He invites her a second time.
She should only dance with him twice, because in tradition, a young girl accepts to dance twice and not 3 times. 3 times would be a commitment. But that evening, she lets herself go. She dances 5 times with Archibald Christie, who tells her he's going to join the Air Force. At the time, the Air Force, airplanes, it makes the heart of young girls melt. She is completely in the myth, the legend of an aviator.
From the aviator's visit that evening, only one carefully preserved trace remains at the manor.
Here at Brooke, we have the original guest book, the one used by Archibald. If I open it to the right page for you. And look, here is his signature dated October 12th, 1912, that famous evening when he met Miss Miller.
Agatha is in love, but shy. Archibald, on the other hand, does not want to waste time. The day after their meeting, they go to Ashfield to have tea. But Clara Miller is there to scrutinize him.
Her mother warns her about Archibald Christie, who has quite a reputation as a seducer. So, she might want to protect her daughter.
Ignoring her mother's recommendations, Agatha regularly sees Archibald for long romantic walks by the sea and evenings at the Pavilion, the most popular theater in Torquay.
One evening, after attending a concert, Archibald asks Agatha for her hand. Agatha's mother refuses because she thinks they do not have a stable enough situation and they do not have enough money to live. He is a young officer without money, and she has a small lifetime annuity left by her father. But it is not enough to start a family.
At first, the lovers get engaged. The wedding can wait, but an event will hasten everything. The First World War breaks out in 1914, and Archibald Christie is assigned to the English aviation. Agatha therefore wants to marry him as soon as possible, but the young officer is hesitant.
He tells her, "It's silly. I might die on my next mission, so it's silly for you to marry me." And then they end up getting married almost on the sly.
They pay the sum of £8 for a special license to be able to marry during Archibald's leave.
They spend their wedding night at the Grand Hotel in Torquay, and immediately Archibald leaves.
Agatha, nevertheless, would have liked to have a perhaps slightly more romantic wedding than this one. But in any case, they are married.
During the First World War, Agatha puts her love life on hold. Archibald is on the front, and on her side, she wonders, should she, like many English women at that time, participate in the war effort?
Very, very quickly, she makes a decision. She decides to go help. So, help how? For a woman of the time, many women become nurses or caregivers on the battlefields. That's what she did. She went to work to hospitals.
And very quickly, the first wounded arrive, who are in a terrible state. And Agatha has the soul of a nurse. She loves caring for people. She is a good listener. She is quite patient.
She witnessed some quite horrifying things, in any case, that made her very, very uncomfortable and made her unhappy and terrify her too.
In the town hall of Torquay, transformed into an improvised hospital, Agatha Christie is brutally confronted with horror, with this death that already haunted her childhood nightmares. But this time, she manages to exorcise her fears by writing. It is indeed during the war that the idea for a first novel is born, a plot fueled by her experience at the hospital pharmacy, where she makes a fascinating discovery: the power of plants.
One day, a doctor tells her, "Be careful, don't add one more drop because that could kill the patient." So then, she starts to understand that indeed, one could commit murders, not just with a rifle like gunmen, but also by using poisons.
In the heart of the war, an unexpected encounter allows Agatha Christie to create the main character of her novel. In 1915, refugees arrive by the thousands in Torquay. Most of them have fled the Kingdom of Belgium with only a blanket and a few clothes as their belongings. At the hospital, Agatha is tasked with welcoming them, and among them, a man suddenly catches her attention.
He is a little man with an egg-shaped head and a big mustache. A very chic gentleman, always very formal.
And this egg-shaped head remained something for her. A memory quite like a comic strip. A real comic strip character. So why wouldn't the detective of her story be Belgian? Wouldn't he have an egg-shaped head, a mustache, and a suit like that famous Belgian immigrant?
She had observed that Belgians often have somewhat exaggerated first names like that, such as Achilles or Hercules. We do have Trifon in Hergé's work. One could say that Hercule Poirot was born at that moment, yes.
This colorful Hercule Poirot does not imagine at the time that one day his belongings would be gathered in Torquay in a museum.
Welcome to Hercule Poirot's study. You can see his famous desk, the chair where he used to sit to solve his crimes and work out the plots and the puzzles. So Poirot is probably the world's most famous detective and Agatha Christie's most famous character. I think part of her loved Poirot and the other part did not. But also a part of her, towards the later part of her life, began to maybe slightly resent Poirot, maybe thinking that Poirot was egotistical and bombastic. So it was really a love-hate relationship.
The proud detective experiences his baptism of fire in the mysterious affair at Styles, Agatha Christie's first detective novel, published just after the end of the war in 1920. A few months after the return of her husband Archibald, also a few months after the birth of their only daughter, Rosalind. It is finally a time of peace and family happiness.
Agatha becomes a mother. She has a little Rosalind, named after the doll she had when she was little. She is happy, extremely happy. The whole family is happy.
So, at that moment, they settle near London, in a small apartment that Agatha strives to make welcoming, because she is truly a real little homemaker. So, she really wants to create a sort of nest for their family.
A nest that Agatha will nevertheless leave against all expectations in 1922, thanks to an extremely enticing offer, a world tour.
Her husband, Archibald, who is always more or less looking for work, is contacted by a man who offers him to be his personal secretary for a trip to the lands of the Empire.
They were preparing an exhibition, and he had to go see what could be found here and there for this exhibition. He was therefore representing Great Britain.
Agatha wonders at that moment if she will follow him because little Rosalind is very young. And so, should she follow her husband or stay with her daughter? And then she receives support from her mother, who tells her that she and her sister will take care of Rosalind, and that she must follow her husband.
And she even adds that in the case of Archibald Christie, who is rather a bit fickle, it's better to keep a close watch on him. So, Agatha decides to go with her husband.
On board the Kildare Castle, a huge ship chartered for this mission of the British Empire, Agatha is among the few women allowed to accompany their husbands during the 10-month expedition. But from the start of the crossing, the experience turns into a nightmare.
It so happens that Agatha Christie was seasick on a boat. As she herself said, she fed the fish.
And she says to Archie, during a stop in Madeira, that she wants to stay here, that she'll take a job as a maid, and that he could pick her up on the way back. She doesn't feel like following him anymore. But then the sea becomes lenient.
They go very far. They go to South Africa, in Australia, in New Zealand. They go to Hawaii, to the United States. So, at the time, it is still a very, very long journey of several months.
She meets the officials just like Archie, and then she does some sightseeing. What's great is that when he has somewhat serious meetings where wives are not invited, she goes to meet the locals, visit markets.
So, she met Bushmen in South Africa, Aborigines in Australia. In Quebec, she was in contact with real pure-blooded Canadians, and not the English who are there.
And it was a great feeling for her of maturing and freedom. Seeing these Australian girls, for example, riding, behaving a bit more like men. And so that for her was a huge opening out of her perspectives.
Agatha Christie reveals an insatiable appetite. She wants to see everything and try everything. Thus, during a stopover in South Africa, she becomes passionate about a sport that is little known and especially reserved for men, surfing.
She loves surfing, so it's true that it seems completely absurd. It's like imagining Marcel Proust snowboarding or Victor Hugo skydiving, but she is a woman of her time, once again.
She goes there, she puts on a vintage surf suit, of course. She gets on the surfboard, she learns to ride the waves, she has a blast, she falls, she gets back up, she's not afraid of anything. She's as fearless as when she was a child, falling from trees and climbing back up. And then she wants to succeed, and she's tenacious.
In England, in the north of Devon, at the Bronson Surf Museum, surfboards similar to those used by Agatha during her world tour, in South Africa, and then in Hawaii, are gathered.
When she went to Hawaii, things changed drastically. She went from this, quite a short board that she rode on her belly, a belly board where you lie on it. She went right to this big board here. If you look at it, it's a lot bigger than me. It's a lot. 40 kilograms. so Agatha would have had to be quite strong to carry this on her own. But we know she had the help of local native people.
One day, she gets tired of seeing Archibald paddle towards the wave much faster than she does. So she looks for a little trick to move forward while getting a little less tired, because 10 hours of surfing eventually wear out the body. And finally, she hears about boys who actually drag the board by tying a string to their feet. And the swimmer is there, she clings to the board or swims, and they take her towards the waves, and that's how surfing goes.
They say she is the first English surfer.
She is the first woman, or Western woman, to surf. She always loved the ocean, the sea. She swam where she lived in Devon in the River Dart until very late in her life.
Upon returning from this incredible expedition around the world, the intrepid Agatha becomes a young mother again. Archibald, for his part, returns without enthusiasm to his office life. His income remains modest, so it is his wife who must support their household. And fortunately, Hercule Poirot's investigations have charmed a publisher who offers him his first big contract.
She realizes that, in the end, writing could be a source of income for her, and since she does it quite easily, she thinks, why not? So she signs up for 5 novels. She has to write 5 novels.
And then, all of a sudden, she realizes, once the book is finished, that she has to start another book already. So in fact, for years and years, she sat at her work table. She keeps writing, 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 writing.
An overflowing activity that is not without consequences.
In her love life, in her life as a woman, the first cracks appear, and notably, she distances herself from Archibald.
The writing that increases the young woman's notoriety becomes a problem in the Christie couple. Archibald reproaches Agatha for working too much, for neglecting their little daughter, Rosalind. The grievances are numerous, and the arguments are increasingly intense. After several years of crisis, punctuated by this incredible disappearance, the Christie couple remains irreconcilable. In 1928, Agatha must therefore resolve to divorce.
When she divorces Archie, she thinks her life, and especially her love life, is over. She tells herself that she will never remarry.
She tells herself that she will never remarry. She wants to be independent at that moment, relying only on herself. It's the time when she decides to take a trip alone.
She decides to go further away. She dreams of another country, really more distant.
It's a way for her to perhaps rejuvenate herself, to start a new chapter in her life. She wants to break away from Madame Christie and also from the successful novelist. Going far away might allow her to escape this confinement.
At that time, a woman who divorced would hide because she was ashamed, because she would cry over her husband. She would cry with her friends. She would act in a way that was expected of her, and she always acted in a way that was not expected of her.
Agatha's big dream is to discover the Orient, but initially, she sets her sights on another destination.
In fact, she first booked a trip to the Caribbean, which I think sounds loathly. But someone told her she'd better visit one of these countries where there are archaeological excavations.
During a dinner, she hears about Baghdad. And then, the people at this dinner describe the city to her as really being a place where, at the time, there are a lot of English people. One of the guests at the table tells her that he knows one of the archaeologists staying there and that he can provide her with letters of introduction. So she changes her ticket. She goes to the Cook agency the very next day and explains that on a whim, she changes her ticket to go to Baghdad by the Orient Express, a train she has always dreamed of.
The Orient Express. On the rails since 1883, it provides the fastest connection of the time between the West and the East. Direct access from London to Istanbul, which opens the door to Baghdad.
It's a prestigious journey because at the time, not everyone can afford it. Even in second class, it's still very, very, very expensive. For Agatha Christie, who has always loved trains and stations, taking the Orient Express is a really big thing, and an open door to the world and to the continent.
So at the time, it was quite an adventure. They crossed countries that were in rather unstable political states, and especially countries that were not at all touristic. Croatia, Yugoslavia at the time, or Serbia. So she goes through very mountainous areas.
And she spent days and days in her bunk, getting up, leaning against the window of the train, watching the landscapes go by. But it was beyond her hopes, because she indeed sees so many people from different countries opening the door, selling water, selling candies, selling food.
And so she takes notes. She takes notes on landscapes. She takes notes on encounters. In fact, she often portrays authentic characters in her novels.
You are sitting in the dining car, for example, and you pretend to read a book, while in reality, you are listening to everything happening around. I am sure that's exactly what she was doing.
In the autumn 1928, the Orient Express, which is carrying Agatha Christie, arrives at its terminus, the Istanbul station. The novelist has just traveled across Europe alone for more than 2 days. She finally discovers, for the first time at the dawn of her 40s, a country whose customs she knows nothing about.
She arrives in Istanbul, which at the time is truly the gateway to the Orient, a city absolutely not Europeanized. And even today, when you arrive in Istanbul, you feel like it's really the gateway to the Arabian Nights, the Grand Bazaar, etc. So she arrives there and really feels like an adventurer.
For her, it's a real burst of sensory excitement, but also lot of people, active people doing things, chattering, hammams. So a new way of dressing, it must have been brilliant for her.
Once in Istanbul, Agatha stays, like every wealthy traveler, in the most prestigious hotel, in the heart of the city, the Para Palace. At the time, it was the very first luxury establishment in the country, a place that became legendary, blending Oriental influence and Art Nouveau.
She didn't have too many choices at that time. The Para Palace was the most luxurious hotel, and it was an official hotel owned by the Orient Express Company.
In the 1930s, the Para Palace is at the forefront of modernity. It offers its guests the possibility to take the elevator and even to have access to electricity throughout the hotel, an exceptional thing for the time. A luxury that Agatha Christie enjoys from her room, located on the 4th floor.
Here is Agatha Christie's room, room 411. Most probably, she's staying here while she traveled to Baghdad. She stayed 2 nights before going to the east. She wasn't a very talkative person. She was rather shy. Here, she rested and gathered information, details, ideas for her future novels. Here, on this small desk, she wrote a few chapters of her books. And in these small drawers, she stored her notes.
According to legend, Agatha Christie supposedly wrote the first pages of her bestseller, Murder on the Orient Express, in this room. It is more than likely, as Turkey inspires and transports her. But now it is a matter of pushing further east and reaching Mesopotamia. Agatha does not know it yet, but it is there that she will find love. In the spring of 1930, she accidentally meets a young, passionate archaeologist. His name is Max Mallowan.
He is 26 years old, she is 39 years old, so they do have quite an age difference, but they simply get along.
He agrees to be her guide during this trip. So, we can already imagine that he was interested in Agatha Christie.
When he talks to her about lost civilizations, he's passionate and eloquent. He is absolutely fascinating, and she listens to him with delight.
Both visit the desert. One day, as they head towards the fortress of Qahadir, not far from Baghdad, a mechanical problem changes their story.
The breakdown trick. Exactly. They were in the middle of the desert. And at that time, there were no phones to call the repairman. And so it was a little moment of panic.
It lasts for hours, of course, because someone needs to help them out. And so they are in full sun. It's terribly hot.
And in fact, Agatha does not lose her composure. She does not blame Max for failing. She lies down and falls asleep since she is tired. She thinks it will be a way to pass the time. And so, Max is quite impressed by this woman.
It was at that moment that Max decided to marry her, because since she made no complaints and did not grumble about the breakdown, she would be a perfect wife for an archaeologist.
Back in England, Agatha Christie says yes to Max, but sets a condition. The wedding must take place in the utmost discretion. It is done on September 11th, 1930, in Edinburgh. Fleeing the English press, it is an Agatha concerned with preserving her privacy who becomes, in the eyes of her close ones, Mrs. Mallowan.
There are two women. There is Agatha Christie who writes, but she cannot change her name. She is known now, so she remains Agatha Christie, which is her pen name. And then there is Mrs. Mallowan on the other side, who indeed influenced Agatha Christie.
This need for escape, Agatha Christie has carried within her since her parents taught her to travel at a very young age.
Agatha, indeed, wanted to get to know a bit of the country. She wandered a little, not at all randomly, but somewhat like other English people, far from England, far from the bad weather, far from the rain, towards welcoming but also mysterious lands.
She was the kind of person who liked to see what was at the end of the road, what happened next. She was very interested in new places, new ideas, people, listening to people.
It's someone who has it in their blood, who needs to move, who, oddly enough, is very static at home, is an English bourgeois who doesn't leave her house much, except to walk around her garden. During the day, she doesn't do much, apart from writing, let's agree, 8-7 hours a day. But her need to leave is something that comes back very, very frequently.
But leaving is not enough. The arid landscapes of the Middle East fascinated her so much that Agatha Christie now wants to explore them thoroughly. Archaeological excavation sites are a new passion for her, which she can finally fully indulge in with her second husband, Max Mallowan. Thus, they wandered hand in hand for more than 20 years through these desert and comfortless areas.
I mean, I don't think they had much equipment, but I guess they had to carry everything with them. They drove in the middle of the desert. It's not like they had a supermarket around the corner.
They are a bit in the middle of nowhere, searching in places that seem a bit arid and involve a rather ascetic life.
So it's often in rough conditions, like the Bedouins. They set up the tent, settle in.
Electricity is quite unpredictable. There are torrential rains that leave them waking up soaked. The excavation conditions in the 1930s are like Indiana Jones conditions. Her greatest comfort zone is the lid of her toilet, which she carries from year to year because it was sculpted for her to fit the existing toilets, which are completely rudimentary.
During the excavation campaigns undertaken by her archaeologist husband in Mosul, Baghdad, Nimrud, or Aleppo. Agatha has only one idea in mind: to be useful.
She was absolutely part of those digs. I mean, she not only helped manage what would have been, what you might refer to as a household, which obviously included however many hundred people are on the dig and, making sure they've got the food, of course. She was also there cleaning statuettes, taking photos of them. She even took photography classes.
She started placing herself in areas of the site and digging as well.
She becomes an archaeologist in her own way, with a knitting needle and a face cream that she uses to clean the small objects she uncovers.
And when she returns, she writes settings. She doesn't write entire puzzles, but at least possibilities for settings and what could bring her things. And as always in her notebooks, she writes a word here, a word there, a word here, a word there. She makes crosses, things we can't understand ourselves. And slowly, puzzles start to take shape.
Her numerous travels allow Agatha to publish unbeatable novels, like Death on the Nile, Murder in Mesopotamia, or Appointment with Death. Her inspiration seems inexhaustible. Her love life is going well, but there is still a shadow on the horizon. Meanwhile, Rosalind, her only daughter, grows up without her mother.
She leaves her daughter to her sister Madge, who is somewhat like her daughter's godmother. Eventually becomes, when her sister is absent, the substitute mother. And one day, during her first trip, she says to her, "But what do I do if Rosalind has an appendicitis attack?" And Agatha simply replies, "Don't operate on her yourself, but for the rest, I trust you."
One could say that she gets rid of it quite often, and that Rosalind had a rather difficult adolescence.
Her attitude as a mother is that of a mother who wants her child to be well, but who cannot, I tell you, stay in the daily routine with her. She is a woman who is not capable of providing daily life to her child.
Maybe it's something typically English. For a period that lasted quite a long time, from the 1920s to the 1970s, well, you could say it became customary. It was the custom. Parents had their life and children had theirs.
In the aftermath of the Second World War, the trips become less frequent. Agatha and Rosalind therefore grew closer and finally made up for lost time. The Queen of Crime, whose home base remains England, now places her family's future at the center of her concerns.
Being financially independent was one of the most important things in her life. I think the lack of money, especially when she was a child, really affected her.
When her father died, indeed, her mother almost sold the house at Ashfield, and then found herself forced to do without servants, having only the cook, and asking her to be careful with food. For example, not to prepare meals for 12 people when there were only 2 or 3 of them. So she was always very aware of money issues.
Agatha Christie made it a point of honor to earn her living through her writing, but her beginnings were difficult. At the dawn of the 1920s, 4 publishers refused to publish her first manuscript. The 5th one finally trusts her, but at what cost?
For her first book, the copyright to The Mysterious Affair at Styles brought her £25, which was nothing at the time. So it's really not even the start of a fortune.
And as she was very happy to be published, as authors often are, she admits herself that she signed anything, that she didn't even read her first contract, and very quickly she went to see an agent who looked at her with pity, saying, "But how could you sign that?" And that's how she started her collaboration with Edmund Cork, who was her agent for 40 years.
I think she maintained a very friendly relationship with him. She completely trusts him. The work of an agent is complicated when managing the rights of an author like Agatha Christie.
He negotiated contracts for her where she had exclusivity on certain rights, where she got percentages much higher than what she had before. He was an excellent agent.
This fruitful collaboration contributes to Agatha Christie's global rise. She is soon distributed in more than 100 countries around the world and accumulates about 50 novels in 30 years.
In the early 1950s, Agatha's success is considerable. She sells extremely well in the United States. She sells extremely well in England. She tops the sales charts. She has become a professional author, meaning she sits at her desk to write her book, whether she feels like it or not.
Success eventually leads her to become somewhat a slave to herself, in a way. She even has an expression. I am like a sausage machine.
One of the countries where Agatha Christie has always been most successful is France. It all goes back to the 1920s. A French publisher was then looking for new authors specializing in a still young genre, the detective novel. And it is thanks to the disappearance of Agatha Christie in 1926 that this man discovers this English writer, who became a tabloid star across the channel. 1 year later, he decides to publish her in France.
Here we have the very first title of the Mask collection, The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, which was actually Agatha Christie's 6th novel, but the first title published in France. This title was published in August 1927 at the start of the school year.
And this French publishing house was not mistaken. Agatha quickly became the most profitable author in its catalog.
Since the beginning, we have sold more than 10 million copies of Agatha Christie in the French market, which shows not only the reader's appreciation, but also that over generations and still today, there is this passion for her mysteries and her detective novels.
A passion that pays off big. Agatha Christie quickly accumulates colossal income that she will now have to manage with the help of her agent and friend, Edmund Cork.
So, Agatha Christie is always very pragmatic, even when it comes to money. And so, in 1955, she decides to create her company, which is Agatha Christie Limited, and which manages the entire body of work and derivative rights, which are already very significant at the time, you know?
That was formed on the advice of her agent and lawyers and so on, as a solution to this problem of her not having copyrights.
To protect her financial assets, Agatha Christie also finds a trick that will allow her to no longer pay taxes on her royalties. She sets up her company in a small paradise not far from England.
The Republic of Ireland Independent Island, Southern Ireland in quotes, is a paradise for authors, for artists, and particularly for writers. Why? Because at the independence of Ireland, the country decided once and for all to exempt artists, and particularly writers, from taxes. Ireland lives under the trauma of having lost most of its great minds, the great poets in the 19th century, because it was a land of misery, a land from which one had to emigrate to survive. And the only way independent Ireland found to bring them back was to say, you no longer have to pay taxes. It's paradise on earth for writers. It's a tax haven even better than a tax haven. That is to say, there is not even any fraud. It's legal.
Thanks to this system, Agatha Christie soon accumulates record earnings. But these massive inflows of money are far from going to her head.
Agatha Christie's success did not change her fundamental nature. She managed to remain a fairly simple woman.
Just because she had a lot of money, she didn't start buying incredible outfits, incredible bags.
She was a woman who could be content with a slice of smoked herring, who didn't feel the need to eat caviar or drink champagne, even though she could easily afford it.
Her life was calm. She had the life of a woman staying at home, walking in her park. Indeed, it's called a lifestyle, but since the rentiers and bourgeois of the time lived like that, it must be put into context. It was natural.
I think it's someone whose Victorian grandmother must have taught them to spend their money wisely.
Even though her upbringing and character made her frugal, Agatha has a guilty pleasure she is able to indulge in at her leisure, thanks to her fortune.
She buys herself houses, and that was madness. She had up to 11 houses, and she writes, "Long live houses." She plays with doll houses. For her, it's a life-sized game.
She buys them, she sells them, she renovates them, she likes it. She has the soul of a collector, so in her houses, she can also place all the objects she has brought back from her travels.
I would say that her interior is more that of an archaeologist rather than that of an English woman who would live at home solely for the children and to manage a servant here, a gardener there.
These houses were always very comfortable. They were functional. Everything wasn't perfect like in a boutique hotel, but there was a comfortable bed, sofas where you could sit in the living room, light coming in at a good angle, and beautiful trees and flowers.
In these rather opulent houses, Agatha Christie, as a good English bourgeois of her time, likes to entertain her friends, but what she values above all is discretion. She protects her private life, especially in her main residence in Wallingford, a remote town an hour by train west of London.
You can see the house just behind me. It's a large Georgian house, larger than what they initially thought of buying. Agatha and Max found it in 1934 and made a quick decision because they had to leave for excavations in the Middle East. So they bought it, paid for it, and then left. And when they came back, they had to deal with it.
Here, in this modest town of 6,000 inhabitants, by the Thames, Agatha Christie lives far from the hustle and bustle of big cities and the journalists who pursue her. She writes her last successful novels here, peacefully, alongside her husband, Max.
Here, she could be Mrs. Mallowan, so she was a private person, an ordinary person. Of course, they all knew she was Agatha Christie, and people knew this famous person lived in here, but no one knew the exact address, as they led a very discreet life.
Fame was very different back then. You could do your work without necessarily appearing in public or tweeting on social media, unlike today's writers.
Agatha Christie may be rich and famous, but she lives in Wallingford, like any ordinary woman, away from prying eyes. But an unexpected rocket will put her in the spotlight, much to her dismay. A rocket to which she cannot say no.
In 1947, Queen Mary, wife of King George V, requests a gift. The Queen's 80th birthday, everyone expects a gift. Diamonds, rubies, I don't know what absolutely royal gift. She requests a play by Agatha Christie to be performed on the radio.
And so, this wish is conveyed to the novelist who, of course, complies and writes a radio play titled Three Blind Mice.
Agatha Christie once again has a date with success thanks to this new murder she stages. This play is a hit on the airwaves, and her producer immediately feels that he has a particularly lucrative opportunity, which could further increase the author's fortune.
Peter Saunders, who was the producer of, I think, all Agatha Christie's plays, asked her to adapt the radio play into a stage play, and she did that. But it could not be called The Three Blind Mice, because before there had been an unsuccessful play that was called The Three Blind Mice. So they had to think of another title, and they came up with The Mousetrap.
In London, in the famous theatre district, The Mousetrap, La Souricière in French, is performed every evening in front of 400 spectators.
Everything was sold out even before the play was performed. It was like Harry Potter or Hamilton today. It was a big hit. It was there every evening.
the story of pure Agatha Christie. A murder occurred in a guest house, a very clever plot that places all the play's protagonists on the list of suspects. Thus, the Queen of Crime unknowingly launched in 1952, the most performed play of all time in a London theater. 10 consecutive years of performances. It was unprecedented. To celebrate this record, Agatha's producer organizes a special event. During this reception, the writer agrees to speak to the press she has always avoided like the plague. As an exception, she remains, as usual, shy, modest, and unable to explain her success.
I know she did not expect such success. I think it's the same for the rest of her work. In my opinion, most writers will tell you that they do not write with the idea that it will be successful or that the audience will be there.
Even today, Agatha Christie's play is still showing in the English capital. And 65 years after the premiere, the theater remains full.
Here we have this number board, which shows every day the new world record for performances of The Mousetrap given in London. The number here is 26,882, which is absolutely enormous. Enormous. Usually, a play celebrates its 100th performance, and a musical might celebrate its 1,000th performance.
It has become like a monument, meaning people come to London to see the Tower of London, visit Madame Tussauds Museum, and then one evening they go to see The Mousetrap.
And as a fun fact, every time a taxi in London 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, just like today, takes a client to the theater, if the person in the taxi doesn't leave a tip when paying the fare, do you know what the driver does? He gives the name of the murderer of the play.
At the time, Agatha Christie does not fully grasp the incredible financial returns her play will generate. However, she decides, 3 years after writing it, to give the royalties to her grandson, Matthew, for his 9th birthday. An invaluable gift from a loving grandmother to the only child of her daughter Rosalind.
She gives the rights to this play to Matthew, her grandson, and it represents a real fortune, in fact. But she is unaware of that at the time, except that she is given a gift.
Her grandson, who was, as she says, the luckiest in the family.
Today, 74 years old, Matthew, Agatha's grandson, is at the head of an absolutely colossal fortune amounting to hundreds of millions of pounds. The exact amount of this fortune is perhaps one of the last mysteries Agatha Christie left behind since her death on January 12, 1976. She departed quietly, as was her habit, at the age of 85.
The fortune must be absolutely insane. Now, why is there a taboo around this fortune? Simply perhaps because it involves money. And at the Christies, they don't talk about money.
What it really generates in terms of money for me remains an even more opaque mystery than an enigma Poirot wouldn't have solved, you know.
In 1971, a few years before her passing, Agatha Christie experienced one of the most important moments of her life by becoming, by the will of Queen Elizabeth, Dame Christie. A knighthood. It was necessary to honor such an exceptional figure, a universal novelist and an incredibly modern woman with 1,000 faces, an elusive child, a lover, and lost, an insatiable traveler, elevated today to the rank of an institution, and above all, loved everywhere in the world. She who concludes her bestseller, Death on the Nile, with these words borrowed from Molière: "The great ambition of women is to inspire love,